All right, so what we're going to start with some higher time frame conditions, and I'm going to show you how you can use kind of a little trick to build your higher time frame trend conditions in BloodHound. NinjaTrader has a little bit of trouble working with multiple time frames and things like that, and there's just some kind of a bug there, and they haven't been able to figure it out. But I'm going to show you now how we can get around some of that. It's just something I kind of figured out when working with some of the higher time frame conditions. So let's just show, I don't know, let's show an EMA 20. And whether we're above or below that EMA 20, let me set this to white so we can see it. So that's EMA 20 on the 30-minute chart. We want to show when the closing price of the 30-minute chart is above or below that line on the 576 tick chart. Okay, and you'll see that when I build this in BloodHound, it shows perfectly for the historical chart. But when we start updating incoming data with market replay or live data, oftentimes we'll get bars on which we get no output, and I'm going to show you how we can kind of get around that. So I'm going to build, first of all, let me add in the higher time frame. So in order to add a higher time frame to BloodHound, you just click on this chart button here on the solvers tab, and then come down here and set your chart according to what you want. Obviously you can use any higher time frame you want. We're just going to use a 30-minute chart, and every time you do this you'll have to refresh the chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this solver that's on the default time frame, that's on the 576 tick chart right now, and I'm going to move that down onto the 30-minute chart. So I just highlight that solver, click on the down arrow, and it moves it down to the 30-minute chart. And let's go ahead and save this. We'll save this as BloodHound Workshop Higher Time Frame and RSI Divergence. 14, what is today? This 18th, 718. There we are. So now we just tap on the chart, hit the F5 key to refresh it. So now then, let's build that condition. So we'll connect it, and we're going to show when the closing price is above or below the EMA 30. So indicator A is the closing price. Indicator B is the EMA 20, sorry. And there we go. So that's the condition, right? And you can see, let me just link these up real fast. Global crosshairs, turn that one on, and turn this one on. So you can see at this point, right here, at the close of this bar, you see I'm showing it on the chart on the left, on the 30-minute chart. So that bar doesn't actually close until right there. Okay, and when it closes, then it goes to the next bar. So that's why it's showing the short condition as starting right there. All right, and then it goes all the way up until the close of that bar, that green bar. So really, in real time, the closing price would get above the 20 EMA, if you were using calculate on bar close equal false. So it would update, with every incoming tick, it would turn back above the EMA 20 at this point right here. You can see my cursor on the left when the price gets back above the EMA 20, right there. So using calculate on bar close equals true, the short condition is staying. We're keeping that short condition until the close of that bar. All right, so let's say, well, here, I'm going to show you this. We're going to load replay data. I already have some replay data. Let me just delete these other charts. Then I'll save this. Okay, and we will connect to replay, market replay connection, and that should load the right day, yeah. So now, where's my little replay thing at? Well, I don't have my replay. That's very odd. Normally you have a little button that allows you to start playing the replay, but I'm not seeing that. Oh, wonderful. All right, let's connect to live data then. There we go. Celso's saying sometimes the only way to get it back is to delete your workspace file, then it will reappear. Okay. Well, let's try it in real time. I'll just set these charts a little bit faster. So we'll use like a 30 tick and a 1 minute chart. Let's do that. Looks like a pretty strong uptrend today. Yeah, we'll set this to 30 ticks. And a 1 minute chart here. Okay, and then inside of the template, I'll change this from a 30-minute to a 1 minute chart. And then tap F5 to update it. Okay, so let me now turn this off. I'll go ahead and add the RSI. Okay, now I'm going to make it calculate on bar close equals false. And then when you do that, you have the option here for the higher time frame of using either the inherited calculate on bar close setting or true. So you could use calculate on bar close equals true with the higher time frame if you're using false on the base chart. Okay, but we're going to keep it inherited. The thing I'm trying to show, well, all right, let me update it again. The thing I'm trying to show is that, I don't know if you noticed this, but before I refreshed, it was still coloring these bars green. All right, I wish I could use the replay function so I could show you this, you know, very, very quickly, but I don't have that luxury right now. So let's just give it a second and see if we can't get a few bars plot here. Essentially what I'm going to show you is what you'll see sometimes is that you'll stop getting output out of BloodHound, and you might be sitting there scratching your head wondering why, and it has something to do with the way that NinjaTrader links up these two charts, okay, when you're adding in a higher time frame in the background. And what I've done, what I do to get around that is simply add a toggle to this. So this is set to close above or below the EMA 20. And hopefully next week I have everything in order, and I'll really show you exactly how this works in Market Replay. But all you do is you take a toggle and you set this to force that signal on. So you force it on, and then when you get the opposite signal, you force it off. And there will never be a time when you stop getting output out of BloodHound. All right, so it will make sure that the current signal stays on until you get the opposite signal in the opposite direction. Okay. Let me just see what this is showing us here. So that's just the way that the higher time frame works. You see it's still coloring this green. It's just the way NinjaTrader does the higher time frame. It's going to color this green until that big down bar closes, even though we have it set to calculate on bar close equals false. It's just, you know, I think Ninja 8 will be addressing this, but for now this is kind of what we have to deal with. So even though we have it set to calculate on bar close equals false, it's still coloring this green. But if you remember, when we were back here, as the new bars were coming in, it was coloring it red. So that's kind of the discrepancy I was wanting to really show in great detail using the Market Replay, but I can't control the speed of these bars coming in, so we'll have to do that next time. But long story short, for your higher time frame trend conditions, just remember this, write this down. For your higher time frame trend conditions, to avoid with live data or Market Replay data, to avoid any possible bars on which you get no output out of BloodHound because of the higher time frame discrepancy, just use a toggle and you force that signal on and then force it off when you get the opposite signal. Okay, so just kind of make a note of that. It's just kind of a little trick that I have when doing higher time frame trend conditions. All right, not a crossover condition, not a condition that you want to get on just one bar, but only with higher time frame trend conditions. So conditions on which you get a long output or a short output on every single bar. Okay, so you can just make a little note of that. Now then, let's get on to the divergence, and this is going to probably take a pretty good little while to get through this, but let's do this now. So let me turn the data off. Okay, so here, I'll disconnect this. What we need to use in order to show when we have, obviously divergence is a higher high in price, but a lower high in the RSI or the oscillator, whatever oscillator you're using. So this is the divergence that we want to show, and actually the divergence is starting right here. Right? So that's divergence right there as much as this is divergence right here. All right, so this is kind of what you want to show for an exit, and that's what I've built into those templates that are available on my website. Now, to kind of walk you through how we go about defining the logic, I'm going to add a Donkian channel. This was developed by Richard Donkian. And we'll set this to a period of 30. So we'll look back 30 bars, and let me make these easy to see. So we'll set it to 2. We don't need the mean. I'll just make that transparent. And this essentially just shows us the highest high and the lowest low of the past 30 bars, of the look back period of the past 30 bars that we've defined. All right, so I'm going to add that to the chart. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm also going to add this to the Donchian channel. I'm going to add the Donchian channel to the RSI. All right, so we're going to add one more Donchian channel. Now this, if you don't know how to do this yet, this is something worth making note of. If you want to add an indicator onto an indicator, you simply go to the input series here, click on the ellipsis, open up the indicators, and then scroll down to the indicator you want to use, or just tap the R for the RSI. And I'm going to use a 7-period RSI. And we're going to use the plot. We're going to use the RSI, not the average. All right, so I'm going to add this Donchian channel to the RSI, and that's on the second panel, so we need to set the panel to number 2. And I'll change the color of this. Let's set it to yellow. Don't need the mean. Yellow. Okay. Click OK. So now we have the Donchian channel. Oh, I need to change the period to a look back of 30. There we go. Oh, sorry. Van is asking about its focal point. Van, let me show you that real fast. Its focal point. So let me just type it here. Focal point pro trader. This is it right here. Focalpointprotrader.com. And they have the automated dynamic Fibonacci retracements and extensions. It's actually been made available specifically for BloodHound users. So pretty interesting. To my knowledge, it's the only one that's accessible within within a strategy within BloodHound. So you can now show a Fibonacci retracement between swings. So you could show that this is pulled back to the 38.2, and then you could show a reversal off of that kind of a thing, and extensions as well. All right, now to define the divergence, okay, between these, let's just see how many bars we have there. So for this one, that's 32 bars. So our setting of 30 is not quite going to cut it. Let's change it to 40. Now, obviously, you can make this as large as you want, but since the RSI period only has a look back of 7, 4 times the look back period is usually about the highest, maybe 5 times that I kind of want to take it. So no more than 5 or 6 times the look back period of the oscillator for the number of bars I want to allow to look for divergence. Because after you get past 4 or 5 times the look back period, the indicator is basically already kind of reset within its own period. All right, so we're obviously looking for a divergence in momentum, right? So initially the RSI is jumping from, what is this, maybe 25 straight up to almost 90, and then it pulls back. The RSI pulls back very deep, and then you can see the steepness, so the slope of this move is steeper than the slope of this move, right? Not by much, but it's slightly noticeable. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Wow, it's like a hurricane outside my apartment now. Anyway, that's kind of what we're looking for, the waning of momentum. That's what this divergence is all about. So if you have a look-back period that's, really way too long, then you're not really getting the information out of the divergence that you are really looking for. All right, so we don't want to allow, say, a divergence between the high there and then this high back here. That's way too large. So we want to allow a maximum of 40 bars. That's on the verge of being slightly too big in my opinion, but we'll say no more than 40 bars. And this is the definition of divergence, all right, right here. Since we're saying that the RSI has to be making a lower high and the price has to be making a higher high, we'll just pay attention to this because this is very easy once it makes sense to you. And it should make sense. When we're making a higher high in price, the high of the bar has to be equal to the Donchian channel. Doesn't that make sense? So if we're making a new high within the period, we have a look-back period of 40, if we're making a new high, then that means the high of the bar must be equal to the top of the Donchian channel. If at the same time the RSI is below the upper Donchian channel, that's the definition of divergence right there. So really pretty simple, huh? RSI right here is not touching the upper Donchian channel. We have, about 10 points right there between it. But the high of price is touching the upper Donchian channel. So that's two very simple conditions we can build in BloodHound. And let's do that now. So we're going to use a comparison solver. So what do we need for indicator A? We need price, right? Which part of price do we need for a short? We need the high. So if the high is equal to the upper Donchian channel, give us a short. So we're going to set this to high for short, low for long. So in order to do that, we need to load in the SI chameleon, which gives us access to all of the data points on the bar, or any other instrument, by the way. And there's plenty of videos going into depth about this indicator and what all you can do with it. But we need to get a short out of the high and a long out of the low. Short for high, long for low. And then for indicator B, we want the Donchian channel high for a short. Donchian channel right here. Double click it. Set it to 40. We want the upper for short, just like the high for short. And the lower for long, just like the low of the price bar for long. But now, obviously the high couldn't possibly be, remember the high for short, the high couldn't possibly be below the upper Donchian channel. What are we looking for? We're looking for, see, we're getting a long output out of this right now. That's ridiculous. We want a short output. So we set this to 0. What did we say? We said the high must be equal to the upper Donchian for a short. So we set neutral, A minus B, and remember, A minus B equals what? Equals the small amount. Learn as much as you can about this comparison solver, and once you fully understand all of the different things you can do with it, BloodHound will make so much more sense to you. So spend a lot of time on this comparison solver. Learn it, backwards and forwards, inside and out. And once you do that, you'll really start to understand BloodHound. So you see that? A minus B equals 0. So that means the high of the bar equals the upper Donchian channel. All right, that's what this means, this neutral. A minus B equals 0. It's essentially just like saying A equals B when this is set to 0. All right, and now for the long, all right, just like right here, we have bullish divergence, lower low in price, higher low in RSI. We set that to 1, and then we get a long when it's equal to, when the low is equal to the lower Donchian channel. So we'll just name this high low equals upper lower Donchian 40. Okay, and now then what we want to show is that the RSI is not equal to the lower Donchian, or not equal to the upper Donchian channel. So we'll do another comparison solver. And what do we want for indicator A? Because we don't have, multiple data points on the RSI indicator, we obviously don't need the SI chameleon, so we just want the RSI. And we set this to 7. And we don't want any smoothing. Okay, and we're using just the RSI, not the average. And here, we want the Donchian channel, but we want the Donchian channel of the RSI. All right, so I'll add the Donchian channel. First, set this to 40. And then I need to nest the RSI. So I click on the RSI, and we're going to nest it. You see this nest input? So when I click on that, it'll place the RSI under the Donchian channel. And then the Donchian channel that I'm using is going to be getting its data from the RSI rather than from price. You see that? Then I'll set this to 7, 1, and I'll get to all of your questions after we build this little section here. Okay, and then what do we want? We want to get a long out of this. Okay, when it's not equal to the lower Donchian channel. So if RSI is above the lower, we want a long. Does that make sense? When the RSI is above the lower, we want a long, and when it's below the upper, we want a short. So essentially we're going to be showing both long and short conditions when the RSI is not equal to the upper or not equal to the lower. All right, so lower for long, upper for short. Click OK. Connect it. See that? So just like I said, we get both long and short signals, and you can see that here. We get both long and short when the RSI is not touching the Donchian channel. And you can see when it's touching the Donchian channel high, the upper, we get a long signal. And when it's touching the lower, we get a short. So what does this tell us? This tells us that we couldn't possibly get a long signal right here on these two bars. Does that make sense? So we couldn't get a long until the RSI is not touching any part of the Donchian channel. Right? I know this can be confusing when you're talking about, both long and short conditions at the same time. But let's just focus in on this point right here. All right, the low of the bars are touching the lower Donchian channel. The RSI is not touching the lower Donchian. So now we need to add in another condition using this RSI to the Donchian channel condition, and I'm going to show you that now. So this is RSI above or below upper lower donk 40. So now I want to give a minimum number of bars between the two pivot points. So I want to say that there has to be at least 7 bars between the two pivot points. All right, so if the RSI was touching the Donchian channel right here, then there has to be at least 7 bars pass before we can take a trade. That's 5 bars, 6 bars, 7 bars. Right there. So from the first pivot low to the next pivot low, there has to be at least 7 bars in between them. How do I define that? I use a look back node. This function node right here. Click on that, you add the look back node. And what setting are we going to use? We're going to use 7 for the look back, but now we have 3 choices. We could average the output of each of those 7 bars, or we could use the maximum output of those 7 bars, which is essentially just like extending the signal, which is what we do not want, or we could use the minimum. All right, so if the minimum output here, we have -1. Well, it's essentially 1 for the short output. All right, so if we've had a short output within the past 7 bars, we're going to keep that short output. So when I connect that, so when I connect that, you can see that's essentially keeping the minimum output. So if we've had a short within 7 bars, then it's going to keep that short. And if we've had a long within 7 bars, it's going to keep that long. All right, you see right here, we have a long signal. So let's mark that. We have a long signal right there. Let's use an up bar, up arrow. All right, when I connect that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bars. This is the 7th bar right there. When I connect that, we should have output, long output on all of those 7 bars because we had it on at least 1 of the past 7. All right, and just like right here, we have short output on this bar right there. Then we have, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we should have short output all the way up into that bar when using the minimum. You see? So what this does is it disables long signals until after the 7th bar. All right? So because we were touching the lower Donchian channel, because the RSI was touching the lower Donchian channel here, it's going to disallow a long on the next 7 bars. So now, when I connect these two with an AND node, it shows us all of the points at which we have bullish and bearish divergence. You can see right here, look at this. Right here, we just barely had bullish divergence. You see that? The low was right here in the RSI. We just barely had a higher low in the RSI all the way up into the point at which it touches the lower Donchian channel again, which happens on this bar right here. You see that? And then here, we get bullish divergence once again, starting right there where we start to make a double bottom. All right, you can see the low of the bar is touching the lower Donchian channel. But the RSI is not touching the lower Donchian channel. So that's the definition of bullish divergence right there. And what a good exit to a short trade that would be. Let's say you were short from back here. You could have exited here on this bullish divergence, or you could wait for some confirmation, which you would get right here on that reversal bar. Right? So now if we wanted to add confirmation to this, we could say only show us the bars on which we also get a closing price inflection. So I'm using the indicator inflection solver. Setting it to closing price and adding that now. Closing price inflection. Does that make sense? So we're now getting rid of these two bad signals because we were getting a long signal on a down bar. You may want that, you may not want that. And then we're limiting that signal now to only a bar on which we actually inflect the closing price. Inflection just means it turns from down to up or up to down. Right? It inflects. It's the V. It's the point at which it changes direction. And then vice versa, we have one right here with bearish divergence. Isn't that easy? So easy in BloodHound. This is one of the hardest things to program in scripting language. But in BloodHound, it's just a piece of cake. So let's say right here, this is a double bottom. We don't actually have a lower low. Let's say you want to disallow lower double bottoms or double tops, and you want to actually have a lower low or a higher high. What you can do is you can look at the Donchian channel itself. So the current Donchian channel position versus the Donchian channel position, say 5-10 bars ago. We'll say 7 since that's our minimum look back. So we add another, we'll say 8 actually. So we'll add in the Donchian channel for indicator A. I realize this is probably kind of advanced and it may be giving you a headache, I don't know, but I think this is just a great example of what all you can do in BloodHound, because you can do quite a bit. So just bear with me if you're having a hard time. So we set the Donchian channel to 40. We're going to use the lower for longs, remember. Lower is always associated with a long because that's bullish divergence is using lower lows in price. Bearish divergence or short signals are using higher highs in price. So lower for long, upper for short. And then we'll do the same thing in indicator B using the Donchian channel. Set it to 40. Lower for long, upper for short. Except this time we're going to displace it by 8 bars. So now, for a long, if the current Donchian channel is below the Donchian channel 8 bars ago, we want to give a long. So we need to reverse these outputs here. So if it's actually below it, we want to give a long. And if the upper is above the upper 8 bars ago, we want to give a short. Let's see, hang on a second. No, maybe it needs to be within the look back period. I'm going to set this to 5. Yeah. Maybe 4 would be better. Let's keep it at 5. So current donk 40 above or below the donk 40 5 bars ago. Whoop. Can I use the look back or the displacement, I put the displacement in brackets. All right, so we have a displacement of 5 bars. And you can see that's in brackets here. So you can see once the Donchian channel is actually making lower lows, then we're good for a long, all right? But once it starts going sideways, then it's essentially showing us a double bottom. So we are disallowing divergent signals with a double bottom, excuse me, or a double top. So when I connect that, you can see here's the divergence signal without this solver. So when I connect it, then it gets rid of the divergence signals that are occurring at a double bottom. Does that make sense? Then you can see this is our bullish divergence. That's on the verge of being almost too far away. No, it's not. It's 29 bars. I've got it kind of spread out now. We have a maximum look back of 40 and a minimum look back of 7. So there has to be at least 7 bars in between the two pivots. Oops, sorry. But no more than 40 bars. So pretty good looking signals, huh? It's divergence. It's one of the most used concepts. Of course, you can use it to your detriment, obviously, especially if you're in a very strong trending market and you're trying to take counter trend trades. You can have some really bad days, but for kind of a range bound or a sideways market, divergent signals can be great. I like to use them mainly for exits. All right, so what you would do, let's say this would be your exit, but let's make a little bit more allowance because you will have some situations. Let me just find some. And see the divergence template that I've made. This is just a very basic set of divergence conditions. You could make it to where you're only allowing divergence that has started above the first pivot has to be above overbought or below oversold. And then, there has to be, let's say, at least 10 points difference between the previous high and the current high in RSI. So you could put all different kinds of restrictions on this. This is what I wanted to show right here. So remember, this was the original divergence signal that we were looking at. And I was saying, okay, well, this is just as much divergence right here as this is right here. Right? Now, the reason we're not getting the divergence signal right there is because that's not actually a reversal bar, a closing price inflection. That's actually a doji where the close equals the previous close. So how do we account for that? Well, you can see if we did account for that, then it would allow a divergence signal here, a divergence signal here, one right there, and then finally one right here. Now what we do to show that is, rather than a closing price inflection, we'll use the comparison solver and we'll set closing price for indicator A and then closing price for indicator B, but we want to be able to displace it by 1 bar. Right? So we'll use the chameleon once again, SI chameleon. We set this to close right here, close SMA, right? But it's 1, so it's not really an average. We're just using a look back of 1, so it's just the close. And we're going to say, rather than above or below, I'm sorry, we have to displace it by 1 first. So right now, it's giving us pretty much the same exact thing as, well, it's not quite the same thing, because, and I'll kind of explain this. So this is the bar direction solver. You see, the way I've set this now, with the close having to be greater than the close 1 bar ago for a long, and the current close having to be less than the close 1 bar ago for a short, you can see that it's actually allowing a short signal here even though the close is equal to the previous close, and 2 short signals here with the close being equal to the previous closes. So we should get no output out of those with the way the solver is currently set up, just like we do with the bar direction. But for some reason, crude oil and the TF act very differently than other instruments. I don't know why exactly, but if you want to show a range of 2 ticks between one indicator and another indicator, you have to set it to 2.1 ticks for crude oil and the TF. For all other instruments, you only have to set it to 2 ticks, but for crude oil and the TF, you have to set it to 2.1. All right, so for some reason, without even having this neutral amount selected, it's showing us when the current close is equal to the previous close. All right, what we want to see is we want to see both a long and a short output when the current close is equal to the close 1 bar ago. So in order to do that, we set this here to 1. And remember, the small amount here corresponds to this neutral, the one above it, and the one below it. So if we want A minus B, which is the current close minus the close 1 bar ago, to equal 0, so it would allow us both a long and a short output on these bars where the close equals the current close equals the close 1 bar ago. Then for some reason, rather than having only 0 here for crude oil and the TF, we have to add 0.1. I don't know why that is, but that's just, you can get very frustrated and start thinking that stuff is not working right, but that's just the way NinjaTrader displays crude oil data and TF data. I can't answer why. Maybe they would know, but I don't think they even know. Okay. So that's the way it works. All right, so we set that small amount there to 0.1, and we may as well, just for the sake of good practice, set the large amount to 0.1 as well, even though it doesn't actually change anything. Remember, your large is supposed to be larger than the small. So anytime you change the small, it's just good practice to go ahead and update the large. Now, this is, rather than getting this bar direction, rather than actually getting a long signal on these up bars and a short signal on these down bars, we're going to eliminate those. Actually, no, I'm not. Let me just do this. We're going to say close is greater than, equal to, or less than the close 1 bar ago. Maybe I should just leave that for you guys. It's a comparison solver. And remember, the true bar direction solver kind of makes me think it's got something to do with the comparison solver, but the true bar direction solver will not show when the current close is equal to the previous close. It's only going to show actual direction, which means current close has to be above or below the close 1 bar ago. Okay, so this one is giving us both long and short when the current close is equal to the close 1 bar ago. Okay, now then, what we want to do is give some direction to these bars. All right, let's do this. Let's actually set it to where we're only showing just those bars. This is the close equal to the previous close. And now what I can do is I'm going to build another comparison solver, and I'm going to look at now the close relative the current close relative to the current high and low. So I want to show where is the position of that close relative to its high and its low. So I'll set this to closing price for indicator A, and then SI chameleon. So if I want to show 50% greater than closes less than less than 50% or more of the high. So high for short, low for long. I'll explain this in a second. So we're going to set this now actually to, for a long, it has to be above the low. Low for long. That's right. So for the large amount here, we're going to set this to ATRs. So this is the average true range. If we set the look back of the ATR, the period, to 1, and Zach showed me this trick a long time ago, then we're actually looking at the current bar's range. So the high and the low of the current bar. All right, so what this does, now let me do the same thing for the small amount. First of all, I have to set this to, let's just say 50%. And I'll do the same thing for the small amount here. This is pretty neat. So essentially what this is showing us is the closing price above or below 50%? Okay, is it above 50% from its low, or is it above 50% from its high? I'm sorry, below, well, greater than 50% from its high or greater than 50% from its low. All right, and I'll show you what I'm saying in a second, if I can explain this correctly. Rather than setting it to 50%, let's set it to 45%. That'll make more sense. So I'll change this now to 0.45. So in this case, we're going to get both a long and a short output when the bar closes right on the midpoint of the bar. So let me just make this very clear. So I can sometimes over-explain things and then just kind of make it confusing. So if I will do this, I'll set this to 0 and then set the small amount to 0. And you can see the output in BloodHound. Let's change this to like 75. So what I'm saying essentially with this solver is the closing price greater than, okay, if the closing price is greater than 3/4 of the bar, of the length of the bar, give me a long signal. So if it's closing in the upper quartile of the bar, give me a long signal. If the closing price is closing in the lower quartile of the bar, give me a short signal. Do you see what I'm saying with that? Just give me a Y if you understand what the logic is behind this condition. I'm saying if we're closing in the upper quarter of the bar, that's why it's 75%. If we're closing in the upper quarter, we're giving a long. If we're closing in the lower quarter, give me a short. And that is setting the ATR function to a look-back period of 1. So I'm actually looking at the range of the current bar. So I'm looking at the closing price of the current bar, the high and the low of the current bar, and the range of the current bar. I got 1 Y. Thanks, Jim. I'm hoping more of you are understanding what I'm trying to lay out here. Some of you may have even fallen asleep, I don't know, but okay, good. Good. So now what I'm going to show is 50%. And you can see when it's set to 75, you can see right here how the BloodHound output was 0.666 above and below. So it wasn't quite in the lower quartile or the upper quartile. It was right in the middle. So that's why you get equal output for the long and equal output for the short, because it's right there in the middle. So now when I set this to 5, watch what happens. Because it equals 50% right here. These two bars, they actually equal. The closing price is right at the midpoint of the bar. So I'm getting both a long and a short output. That makes sense, right? And obviously if it's closing in the bottom half of the bar, then we're getting a short. If it's closing in the upper half of the bar, then we're getting a long. All right, this is just kind of a slightly more advanced price action condition. So this is something that's very, very useful, especially when working with minute bars, volume bars, and tick bars. It's really just endless, the possibilities with this program. It's pretty incredible, really. So now let's set it to 51%, 55%. You see how the output is getting less and less? You see that? Before, see the output here? Long confidence, 0.909. Before, it was 1. All right, do you see that? 0.909, the first number, the long output, long confidence, 0.909. Now when I set it to 0.6 or 60%, see it decrease? Keeps on decreasing. So now it's 0.833. I set it to 69%. Bam, it goes below the threshold. Okay, what I can do now, set it back to 50% here in the large amount. Set it to 50% in the small amount. So now it has to be, well, here, let me set this before I confuse people. So now we're using both the large and the small amount. So it has to be exactly 50% or greater. There's no kind of gradient. There's no kind of analog output to where it's, you know, gradually going up or gradually going down. It's a digital output now. It has to be exactly equal to or above or below. Okay, so if I set that to 51% in the small amount and 51% in the large amount, that immediately gets rid of the signal there on those bars that are closing right in the middle. Okay, but now what we're going to do is we're going to set this to 45%. So we'll still allow, actually no we're not. We're going to keep it at 51 because I want to make a point here. We're going to keep this at 51. So we're going to disallow the bars that are closing right in the middle. All right, we want to give some direction to these either dojis or bars that are closing right on the previous close. So we're not giving any direction to these two bars, all right, because they're closing right in the middle. It's not a true reversal bar. But because this one is closing on its low, even though the close is equal to the previous close, we're going to call that a down bar. All right, we'll allow that to be called a reversal bar. So we're going to add these two together now. After I've really confused you, we're going to add these two together with an AND node to actually give some direction to these bars that are closing on the previous close. Because it's closing near its low, below the halfway point, we're going to call it a down bar. Because this one's closing below its midpoint, its halfway point, we're going to call it a down bar. All right, so now we're going to say either this or the closing price inflection for the actual trigger. See there? So now we get the short from here. So that's what we were trying to do all along. I just had to explain, in great detail what I was doing, so hopefully you would understand it. So there we go. So not only do we have the divergence right here, but we have the really good one right there, right? All good? Everybody understands? Kind of? Sort of? Maybe? Good. So William, at point 51, it's like bar direction solver. Exactly. Exactly. Precisely. Good job. Okay, cool. And you can see here, this is just kind of barely made the cut. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right on the 7th bar. All right, so if we set this now, if we set this look back here to 8, it would disallow that signal. See that? So because we had it set to 7, it allowed that, questionable divergence signal there. So let's leave it at 8. So, yeah, exactly, Jim. You have to do this stuff a couple of times. And just watching it, it's not going to do it for you. It's really not. You're going to have to you're going to have to build it. You're going to have to actually build it. Just downloading this template and thinking that you're going to be able to, take it and run with it and understand it, you're going to have to build it. All right. What you can do is you can watch this video, have the template in front of you on one chart, have another chart while you're watching the video, and build it from scratch. As you're watching me do it, and then build it from scratch without watching me do it, and then build it from scratch again and make it better. And that's when you'll start to improve. Okay, good, Kim. Yeah, I'll have the recording for sure. Just make sure. Yeah, okay. Oh, great. I didn't switch it to, I didn't switch it to Windows media file, but I'll have to convert it, which is really a pain in the butt for me because I really don't know how to use computers. All right, so that's looking pretty good. You see here, though? Would you call that divergence? Just by looking at it, no, I would not. Why? It is divergence. I mean, look at that. Just barely divergence there. You see that? The RSI didn't quite equal the lower band. RSI equals 13. The lower band equals 12.14. So, in order to make that restriction, and this is taking it, even further here, refining this even further, we could say that there has to be at least 5 points between the RSI and the lower band, or the RSI and the upper band. So now think of how you would define that. There has to be 5 points or more between the RSI and the lower band, or the upper band. So something yada 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 or more, or some kind of a range or whatever, looking at one thing to another. What do you need? You need the comparison. And because you're thinking 5 ticks or more, which of these outputs are you going to use? Or more, or more, or more. The or more corresponds to the large amount. Just think of more equals large. More for large. Small is these three in the middle. Okay, the small amount always corresponds to these three in the middle. The neutral and a set number of ticks. Neutral and X number of ticks. A large amount is X number of ticks or more. It's kind of, it doesn't seem like it's very intuitive, but once you understand how it's working, it really is pretty intuitive. You just have to, you know, really wrap your mind around what all this is telling you and how to understand it. But once you do, it just, everything kind of falls into place and starts making much better sense to you. So for the indicator A, we want the RSI itself. We set that to 7, 1. And then here we need the donkeying channel of the RSI. So once again, donkeying channel, we set it to 40. And now we have to nest the RSI in there. So we nest it, just like so, set the RSI to 7 and 1, and come back and make sure we're choosing the right stuff. So we want the RSI to be greater than the lower band by 5 ticks or more, 5 points or more. Okay, so we want to get along if it is. So we want to get, once again, along from the lower. And if the RSI is less than the upper by 5 ticks or more, we want to get a short from the upper. Okay? So how do we want to get along? If the RSI is greater than 5 ticks or more. 5 ticks or more. Let's just set this to 0 for now. And remember, this greater than corresponds to the large amount. Whoop. All right. So we'll set that to points. We'll set it to 5 points. You see that? So now we don't get a long signal out of this area right here. Right there. All right, so at what point does it start? Right there. Why? Because the RSI is 15.92 and the lower is 12.14. Okay, no, it's right there, right there. Okay, right there, it's 5 away. Well, no, it's greater than 5 away. Okay, here it's less than 5 away, right? So obviously 19 minus 12 is 7. So it's 7 points away right there, and then on the next bar, you see that? It's about, it's less than 4 points away. All right, so we could say, well, we'll just leave it at 5. Okay, so it's disallowing that long right there. So remember, we only want to allow a long if it's greater than 5 points or more away. So you can see the output in BloodHound. We now have that kind of a analog output to where it's, you know, not always equal to 1 or -1, but it's, you know, obviously right here it's equal to 0.172. That's because it's, you know, approaching equality. Once it actually equals it, then the output would equal 0. Once the actual RSI equals the lower band, then the long output would be 0. So if we want to get that digital output to where it has to be exactly 5 points or more, then we set the small amount here to 5 points. And then set this 1 to here, which is really not exactly necessary at that point, but we do it anyway. Okay, so now that's RSI above lower by 5 points or more, and then less than lower, obviously, by 5 points or more. It's kind of a huge a huge description, but that's what it's doing. So if the RSI is greater than the lower by 5 points or more, we get a long. If it's less than the lower by 5 points or more, we get the short. So now, to get rid of this long signal, oh, real quick, you see that? So we would still get the long there because on the actual reversal bar, the RSI has already reversed and is now 5 points above. So what do we have to do? Well, we could either displace it by 1 bar. See that? And it moves over 1. Or we could say if it has equaled less than 5 points within the past 3 or 4 bars, then we want to disallow the trade. And how do we do that? We use the minimum. Again, we'll set it to 4. So if at any point within the past 4 bars the RSI has equaled the lower band, you know what? I'm really going to confuse you guys now, but we could have, here, let me show you this. So I'm just going to connect it now using the minimum. We've set it to 4. All right, you see how that works? But now watch this. I can build that same exact condition using our previous solver because they're exactly the same. I just wasn't thinking, but I could set this one just like this and get the same exact result. So let's do that. I'm going to show you this now. This is the way we should do it, rather because this is a redundant condition, and you want to eliminate redundancy as much as you can in in programming in general, right? I mean, there's always a more efficient way of doing something, and there's usually 4 or 5 different ways you can do something, but there's always going to be one way that's the most efficient, usually. Maybe 2 that are kind of the same, but usually one way is going to be the most efficient. So let's set this now to that same condition. So if at any point within the past, remember we have a look back of 8 here. So if at any point within the past 8 bars, if that RSI was within 5 points of the lower docking channel or the upper docking channel, we want to disallow the trade. So we'll set this one to 5, and we set the large amount to 5, and we've already gotten rid of that signal. Why? Because the RSI was too close to the lower band within these bars. And then that signal, that output, is being carried for the next 8 bars. So because that RSI was so close to the lower band there, we disallow those next 8 bars to take a long. So that has refined it even further. So now we don't get these conditions on which we barely have a divergence. All right, we want to see a more pronounced divergence. You know, kind of, it's not a good one, but this is a better one right here. This is better. Not quite great. See, it got rid of this one, whereas we might say that's kind of close. Let's just see. What do we have there? 87. Yeah, so let's set it to 3.5. We'll set this to 3.5. And there we allow it now. So it's kind of doing a range between 3.5 and 5. So that then allows those signals. But remember, if we take it back to 5, it disallows those because it's looking for a more pronounced move away from the upper, kind of a more pronounced divergence. This one's barely catching it right here. And then this one is, whoop, this is a fairly good one here. This is more of like a kind of a with the trend divergence entry. So this would be more of a good entry here than an exit per se. This would be your exit, 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 right? This would be an entry, because we've already changed trend to up. Okay, so I think that covers it for an exit. So what you would do then, and let's say that you had an entry, so we'll call this the exit. All right, let's have a new tab. Let's say your entry is just a basic crossover, which I hope it's not, but let's say it is. Let's just say you got a 314 crossover. Brain's not working. All right. This is your entry. We save that. So that's our entry. This could be an exit. All right, so yeah, let's do something a little different. It's not going to cut it. Let's say let's have a trend condition in there. We'll say a close above the EMA 20. Let's say 55. We'll join those two together. Okay, so we only have longs when we're up above the EMA 55. Just add that. Okay. Okay, so that's our entry. This would be an exit, one exit. Okay, now let's do this. We'll add Raven to the chart. Got to be connected to add Raven. All right. So this is, we're showing the divergence exit, as it were, right now, and then an entry. So if we wanted to actually test that, and I'll show you how you would add that divergence exit in, then you add Raven. You go to the strategies window, obviously. Remember, Chart Trader has to be off to add a strategy. You add Raven. Select your template here, which is this one, BloodHound Workshop, Higher Time Frame, and RSI Divergence. Click OK. This is our entry, so entry for the entry logic, exit for the exit. Whoop. And of course, because this RSI divergence, we don't see that as often as we're seeing an entry, then we need to also have a stop loss and a profit target, or at least, you know, at a bare minimum, a trailing stop loss. But let's say we have a target and a stop. We're not trailing it, just a hard target and a hard stop. So it's whichever one comes first. Either the divergence exit, the stop is hit, or the profit target is hit. Whichever one comes first. Okay? And then we have backtest mode set to true, and then we enable it, and then click OK. But obviously this is a very, you know, rinky-dink entry and a kind of a souped-up exit, so probably not good performance at all. No, it's not. And that's 407 trades in 3 days. Holy mackerel. That's ridiculous. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a 30-tick. Yeah, this is a 30-tick chart. So let's look at, say, a 400-tick for 10 days. Okay, that's a little better. So about $1,000 in 10 days, but slippage isn't taken into account, which would wipe all of that out. So this would be a losing strategy. You know, at least a tick on each side, so you'd be down at least $1,000. So that's how we do it. That's how you would build a divergence, an RSI divergence exit. So Jim, good question. Very long answer, but you know, that should cover it. So Van, how to enter long or short base if entire body of candle above or below. Okay, that's the one that Zach did. Okay, Zach did that. I'm new here. Are there any templates ready to download? Andreas, you can go to, of course, you're not going to want to, you know, use these as a, you're not going to want to trade these instantly. These are kind of starter templates, and you're going to have to test it and work at it and try to find something that works. You know, it takes a long time to get to the point to where you're actually going to be trading, and if you're jumping right into it, then you're losing money. So you've got to go through a long process of discovery and testing and you know, building and creating before you ever get to the part where you're actually live trading. So go to support, learn BloodHound, template files. Okay, support, learn BloodHound, template files right here. And then these are all the templates. So you have BloodHound templates, you have a market analyzer template, and then you have the chart templates that go with the BloodHound templates right here. Okay? And then the workshop that's associated with it is listed. And then you'll just go back, go to Learn BloodHound, and then Learn BloodHound, and then Training Workshops, or go to the YouTube page, Jeremy Tang, or type in Shark Indicators BloodHound, and you can search the YouTube page. So Sarahi is asking, how do you adjust the candle bar sizes so quickly? How do I adjust the candle bar sizes so quickly? You mean just right-clicking, going to the data series, and then changing the size of the bar here? Well, I think I just have a fast computer, but you know, I just type it in and hit OK. And it comes up pretty fast, but I'm only using 10 days back. I only have one monitor working right now, and GoToMeeting and NinjaTrader, and that's it. So it's probably just appearing that it's loading a lot faster than, say, it normally would. Do you sometimes run into a problem when your higher time frame is using a different unit from your lower time frame? Yes, exactly, Al. That's right. So you asked that at 11:54. So I guess I was going over that higher time frame condition then, right? So that's what I was trying to show here with this higher time frame condition on the exit tab. So when they don't sync up, a lot of times you'll see, especially when you have a trend condition from the higher time frame, as new bars come in, sometimes you will get zero output out of BloodHound on the chart visibly. So if you use a toggle in conjunction with the higher time frame condition, say this is your higher time frame condition here, if you'll use a toggle, and really only for trend conditions, only for conditions on which you get output for every bar, then you'll set this toggle to force on when the signal is active, and then when you get the opposite signal, you want to force it off. And then of course you should get no action out of the reset here if you don't have a reset. All right. If nobody has any more questions, then I think we'll leave it at that, because this is probably quite a lot to take in with this divergence. This is really the second time I've covered this, but I think the first time I was kind of a newbie to presenting and to teaching this stuff, so maybe I didn't teach it that well, but hopefully this was taught well enough so that you could understand it. I know this stuff is hard to wrap your mind around, but once you start to understand, logic and the steps that the computer needs everything to be broken down into, once you kind of wrap your mind around what that computer needs, then this makes, just more and more sense. You realize that, hey, things have to be broken down into micro detail for the computer. What we can pick out with our eyes in a split second, you have to really define for the computer to understand it. So that's why we need so many conditions, which really, this isn't so many. But, to do certain things that we can pick out very quickly with our eye, we end up needing several conditions for the computer. Okay? Is there any way to use, Eldon is asking, is there any way to use degrees to measure MA slope angles? Well, to use degrees would require that you had a fixed scale, and we don't have that capability in Ninja, so we have the next best thing, which we're kind of, using as ticks or points or bricks or ATR. Really, ticks works kind of like a percentage, so let's do this. Let's look at the slope of this EMA 55. And I'll take the strategy off. Okay, here. So you can see that with the exponential moving average, the first close that we have below it gives us a short, and the first close we have above it gives us a long. That's the way the exponential moving average works. If you use a simple moving average, it takes a little bit for the slope to catch up, whether you're closing above it or below it. But with exponential, it's always that first bar that closes below it changes the slope. Okay, so if we want to say that we want to, let's say, eliminate between here and here, because it's going flat right there, and also right here to right there, we want to eliminate that because it's kind of, flat. What we do is we just type into the minimum here, minimum slope. Let's set this to 0.1 ticks. Okay, that got rid of some of it. Let's now set it to 0.25 ticks. Okay, that kind of got rid of it there. So do you see how that works? Now if we want to set this even further to 0.35 ticks, and that's starting to get there. Let's take it to 0.5 and there. So that has eliminated the part that is kind of going flat there. So does that answer your question, Eldon? That's how you use the slope solver. That's this indicator slope. So you just right click, add the indicator slope, or add it from here, solver nodes, default time frame, indicator slope, or go to the solvers tab, select it from here, add it to the chart. That's the indicator slope solver. And you use the minimum value to eliminate the places where the slope is less than half a tick. You got it. My pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great weekend.